I'm going to begin record. So good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about accepted agreement and close and the seller cost sheet. So these are things, this is your bread and butter. This is what you need to learn how to do, and you need to learn how to do it very, very well. How many of you have started doing a practice purchase offer? Okay, I asked you to do that a couple of weeks ago. All of you should be working on doing a practice purchase offer. When you're done with that, you need to do a practice listing. Pick a listing, pick a house that you know, pick one out of the MLS, write it up, have your manager look it over. We're not looking to see that you can't do one. We're looking, what don't you understand when you're reading it? Highlight it, write on it, ask questions. It's the best way to find out what you get immediately and what you just don't understand how you're supposed to fill it out. And then when we do have the listing and purchase contracts, which are coming up soon, you'll have better questions because you'll have attempted to write up purchase offer and a listing agreement.
Yeah, and you need to get pretty conversant with those forms because the client is going to be asking you questions potentially. So you do need to get pretty comfortable.
Yep. And your contracts are your best tool in your toolbox if you know what they say and you know what line it is, and you can speak to them specifically. And every area has their own purchase contracts, so they are all a little bit different. Deb says she can't hear anything before she couldn't unmute. I don't know how to help you, Deb. You may want to log out. She may want to log out and log back in. It might be the easiest thing. So objectives are to discuss specific duties and expectations of each side of the transaction, examine the process from contract acceptance to closing, be able to complete a seller net sheet, and understand the essential role of effective organization and communication skills. So that's what we're hoping to learn today. So this is everybody's biggest question. Okay, now you got an accepted contract. Now what?
Yeah, this is where you start to really earn your commission, because getting a signed contract is the beginning. It's not the end.
Yep. So now what? And that's what we're going to talk about. What now? I love this sheet. It's right on your Howard Hanna dashboard. If you have your dashboard, and there's a little search bar up in the top right corner with a magnifying glass. If you type in buyer seller responsibilities, it pops right up. This is one of my favorites. There are a bazillion out there in the world. This is one that Howard Hanna created. It's got the buyer side and the seller side, and it's a really nice thing to have a visual of who's doing what when. If something in your contract is different, like here on inspection, you may want to think of, are there well and septic? And if there is, if the buyer is paying for either of those, you may want to put something over here. You know, who's doing it? So you may want to write on one and make some edits. You may want to put some dates on one. These can be great, and they're not always 100% the same every time, because there may be some things that the buyer and the seller have switched roles on because of that deal. Every deal is unique. This is traditionally how a deal is going to flow. All right. So there are many steps to take before the settlement. As you can see, what's the first thing after you get a purchase offer and it's been accepted? What's the very first thing that's got to happen?
Attorney approvals.
That's the second thing. But good. That's good. What's the first thing? Buyer has to put give something. What is it?
The
earnest money deposit. There you go. The money. The money's the first hard date. It's within 2 days. It's 2 calendar days. It doesn't matter if it's Saturday or Sunday. This is a hard date. In a seller's market, if you got an accepted contract on Friday, you have 48 hours after midnight, right, Jen?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's a weird, like 12:01 to 12:01 time. So it's like 48 hours in a little bit. You have to have a copy of either the check or receipt of the check, that it's been received somewhere, hopefully the listing office. I like to get them in hand and take them. They can be mailed, and we now have a thing called earnest, which is a deposit that can be done electronically, which is really nice. But that's a hard date, and that's your first date. And you have 48 hours. If you miss that date, they can go ahead and accept another contract. So I've worked with agents who for some reason think that's a fast and loose thing. It's not. Yeah, and Jen's saying check out earnest with 2 N's. So that's the first thing. The second thing is going to be, Aaron, you were right on, attorney approval. In our area, is it true for you too, Jen? 3 calendar dates, 3 days now, not including weekends or holidays.
And it has, yeah, at least 3 days.
Minimum.
You know, it used, and the reason why that rule went into place was because people were writing purchase offers and saying that it had to be through attorney review within like 12 hours. And it was just not, you know, that just wasn't a fair and level playing field. So they did say the attorney review has to be 3 days or more.
Yeah, because we have attorneys who are in court and they just couldn't possibly do that. So, so this is, you're going to want to review this. So you have your attorney approval, mortgage commitment if there's a mortgage. You also, proof of funds, you'll have to have a proof of funds letter. I like to have that before with the purchase offer, and I put it in the private comments because I'm not considering your offer unless I know you can actually pay for it. Some realtors do not do that. If they don't, you need to get that proof of funds from your client as quickly as possible on a letterhead from either a bank or a financial institution or their attorney. And talk to the listing agent what they'll accept. I was once given an ATM receipt. That does not work. I laughed. I was like, that's cute. No, go get me something real. And then there's all of these dates. Some are hard. Anybody know the difference between a hard and soft date?
Soft is more of like an estimated time that could change depending on if something happens.
Yeah, and a hard date is if you miss it, the contract's invalid. A soft date is it's not going to invalidate the contract. However, if you have dates, you need to have continuations, which are, you're going to have to write a piece of paper, an addendum with signatures and initials for everybody. That way everyone knows what's going on. And realtors who do that, they get to closing far more often than realtors who don't. Deb, I'm hoping you can hear. Can you hear? Good. All right. And you've got to get signatures. Go ahead.
One of the biggest things is closing dates. And you need to educate your buyers and sellers that closing dates are on or about dates. They're not hard and fast. There's way too many moving parts. So, you know, I had a buyer who had put all of their things in a moving truck, and then they found out that the house they were buying wasn't closing on the contract date. And so, you know, there was a lot of very high emotions because, you know, it was an expense. They were going to have to pay for their stuff to sit in a moving van for 2 more days than they intended. So, you know, just be aware at the very beginning to educate, to say, you know, closing dates are rarely hard and fast, unlike other dates.
Shauna?
So today's session is really good for me. I kind of wish we did it last week. So on Sunday, I have a listing that I've had since December that had 2 showings, and I got 2 offers. So we had competing offers. So it was a lot of going back and forth Sunday night, Monday. And there were a couple of things that you guys have hit on that resonates obviously with me because it's so fresh. But one of the agents did a 60-day commitment, 90-day close date. And of course claimed to me that, you know, that was they're just dates, they're just estimates, they can close earlier. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. You know, he's like, well, down here, that's norm. I'm like, no, that's not norm. So he was very sad to hear the buyer's agent on that one, that he didn't get it, that they ended up losing, you know, their offer. You know, they didn't get accepted due to the fact that of the closing dates.
So commitment date in Western New York, Rochester and Buffalo, and I think it's true across Capital, is usually 30 days.
Yeah, 30 to.
And commitment and mortgage closing is usually 40 to 60, depending on what your loan officer has directed you to write, depending on their workload and their underwriters. Because sometimes they are working at 45 days. Sometimes they are at 60. I take my cue from my loan officer. I ask them,
Yeah.
I'm writing what should I put in? Better do 60. And I don't ask them why. I just know that they're on it. If I say, I think I'm going to lose the offer if I don't get 45, can we push it? They might say put 50 days or something, but I gotta have a loan officer who can back that date up. But it is a softer date. And so it's a target. I tell my clients from the time we write the purchase offer, and nearly every time I talk to them to closing, I say, remember, closing is a target date. It can move. We will only know within 24 to 72 hours ahead of time what the actual closing date is. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I know, it's the most stressful part, but you know, well, people get through it. Don't worry about it. And they do, people get through it. And so review this sheet, talk to your manager about this process. There may be additional steps depending on your deal, but this is a pretty good document. And there, like I said, there's a billion more. You may make up your own at some point. Organization, communication, and more communication. Jen, you want to talk about this, or how's your voice?
Yeah, I'm okay. I woke up feeling like not 100% today, so bear with me. You know what, this is just what goes back to what I had said a couple of minutes ago. Communication, communication, and then more communication. And just remember that even if your buyers or sellers have bought and sold previously, it's not something they do all the time. So don't assume that they know how it's supposed to go. So it is very important to keep everybody on the same page from beginning to end. It'll make your life so much easier. But this is a transaction of calendars. And you need to make sure that everybody is looking at the same calendar, the same dates. And you know, we'll talk on the next slide, like who does that mean? I mean, vested parties. You know, what does that mean? The people who were showing up to sign the documents at the closing, and or the people who are showing up with the money. Those are the vested parties. But it's so paramount to keep everybody on the same page. And right now, with all of you being new, that includes your manager every step of the way, because they're the ones who are going to know the local market and how things are supposed to go. And, you know, deals go sideways almost every transaction at one point or another. So don't try and go it alone. But, you know, clue your admin in. You know, make sure to keep the attorney and the mortgage person in the loop. You know, get that mortgage person's name, phone number, email, you know, whatever contact information you can get of them is key, because it'll make your life so much easier to over involve everybody. Maggie, do you want to have any other comment to that?
Would you explain what an executed agreement is for those who may not understand?
Fully executed means that it's been signed by all parties and gone through and the attorney review. Right, Maggie? Because
yeah, so executed is everybody's also got a copy. I actually looked that up recently just to make sure I had a complete understanding myself. So it's signed and delivered to all interested vested parties.
and
so,
just, you know, New York is different. than any other state in the land. An attorney can kill a deal within that attorney approval time period for no reason. They do not have to have an explanation for killing the deal. So that is something, that's like the little bit of the eggshell couple of days that, a buyer gets cold feet or something. During that attorney review, the deal can be killed and for no reason.
But once that
So-
attorney approval is done, that's a whole different ball of wax, and that's an attorney area, but there may be fines included to either a buyer or a seller who's changed their mind, and it gets very complicated. So,
Yep, and people, have 3/4 of the way through, or just, whatever happens, there's a chance they could lose their deposit. There's a chance that they're on the hook to pay your commission. So, there are a lot of moving parts after attorney review.
most of your deals won't get pulled apart. Most of your deals will go through, but you'll have some that fall apart. Just, I just don't want you to feel like that's the majority. It's not. Closing calendar. Create a closing calendar that notes all essential dates and make sure all vested parties have a copy. Who are those? They're your manager, your office admin, your loan officer, both sets of clients, attorney or closing company, other agent or co-broke. So here's a good question. If you've got a purchase offer and you're a buyer's agent and there's a listing agent, let's assume it's someone different. It's not dual agency. Who delivers all of the signed copies, attorney approved copies to everyone? Who is responsible?
Listing agent?
No. Does seem like it'd be the listing agent, but it's not, because who's bringing the offer?
Buyer's agent.
The buyer's agent.
okay.
So if you think of it as the buyer's taking ownership, as the buyer's agent, you're taking ownership of the paperwork. That may help you. So they're taking ownership, you're taking ownership of the paperwork. If I'm a listing agent, I'm watching all of that very carefully for my sellers, because not all buyer's agents are created equal. So if they are not performing their duties, I will step in and get everything where it needs to go. I'll have some conversation on the phone with the listing agent and say, hey, I'm just wondering, is everything okay? I didn't get a copy of the contract. I don't see it's been sent here or there or the other place. Checked with my attorney, they don't have it. Is there an issue? Oh no, I'm just, my kid's got a ballet thing, and I just move the paperwork along. And I make a mental note. Real estate is not this agent's priority.
Yeah,
And
there
it
are
may
a lot
make-
of transactions where you will have to play both parts because you will be more knowledgeable and have been educated. There's a lot of agents out there who work for brokers who don't have any training. And that will become very apparent. You all think that you don't know very much. You know plenty compared to other licensees out there. So, at the end of the day, don't say, well, that's not my job. That's not part of my job. Remember, your job is to get your clients what they want and need. And that's, the end result is that closing table where they get the keys. And it's really important for you to remind your clients throughout this whole process why they're going through all of this pain and agony, so that they keep their eye on the prize also. But, a lot of transactions, you're going to be doing yeoman's work. You're going to be doing a lot of both sides just because the agent on the other side just doesn't know.
And so just grin and bear it, get through it. And many times, if the other side isn't performing, but their clients see that you are, later on, guess who they come back to? I've had many closings where after the fact, their sellers or their buyers have come back to me and said, I'm working with you next time, because this deal wouldn't have happened if you hadn't have done this, this, and this, because they're not completely unaware. So if you're just grin and bear it and just get on with it. And do not do the social media trashing of another realtor. Now with NAR, it's a big deal. So stay out of
Yeah.
those waters, just stay away, because you are not now held to your responsibility is outside of real estate now. Your conduct, your ethics follow you through everything now.
You can never separate yourself from your license.
There's Jen. So make sure you're reviewing with your clients what they can expect and when, that timeline. And we have specific seller and buyer timelines, which won't confuse them. The buyer seller one is for you to keep track of. Give them their own responsibilities. What you don't want is a seller saying, did they do this? Did they do that? There are people who will try to get involved. Don't do that. Keep them on their own timetable. That's enough for them to pay attention to. Dates and timelines to track on a closing calendar. Jen, you want to go?
No.
No? Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
So execution, acceptance date, earnest money amount, when it's due, who holds it. So the listing agent always holds the earnest deposit. I've never seen it otherwise. Have you? No. And it will be in the MLS. It will tell you who the escrow bank is. Hopefully they've filled out their paperwork properly. Title search has been ordered.
Yeah, this is a biggie. May, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The title these days is a biggie. And I know, at least in the capital region, because a lot of courthouses are closed, and yes, most everything is online, but just be aware and pay real close attention to, and bug the attorney to make sure that that title has been ordered. It's been taking weeks for title to turn around, and it should not be the case. Especially in our area, and we don't use abstracts, and I know they still do in Western New York. So that's a whole different animal, but just be aware and make sure that, you know, depending on where you're at, whichever attorney is ordering title, that gets done sooner rather than later. And some attorneys will wait until after inspections are done to order it. And sometimes that can be too late. You'll never make the dates. So again, you know, talk about a lot of moving parts. You just need to be aware and bug them and make sure your clients know to bug them about the title, because for whatever, all throughout COVID, that has been the biggest nightmare for getting deals to the closing table. It's taking forever for title work to be done.
So ask your managers what attorneys, excuse me, what attorneys are good at getting the title and getting the closing on time. They'll have a list. It won't be one. They'll have a list of people that they like to work with in the area that are local, that are real estate attorneys. It's a mistake for people to use all-purpose attorneys, because it's like, if you're going to have brain surgery, you're not going to a GP, you're going to a neurosurgeon. You want to work with a real estate attorney whenever possible. Will you have clients that say, no, I want to work with my general? Yep. So you need to understand the process so you can say, hey, I need you to order the title before the contingencies are lifted. Yep, go ahead.
And then you'll have the clients who are like, my brother is an attorney in Manhattan and he's going to represent me. Shoot me now. Real estate is done completely different south of Columbia Greene counties. So I'm just warning you that if a client says, oh, I have my attorney is, you know, downstate, it's a complete different animal that they're going to try and turn this transaction into. So do all you can to try and get them to use a local attorney, because it can turn a little nightmarish.
A lot nightmarish. So the next one is HOA and condo documents. So if you're in an HOA or a condo, and an HOA can be a neighborhood. I lived in a neighborhood. I lived in a single family home. We had a HOA because we had cul-de-sacs that were privately plowed, and we had a community pool with a lifeguard, and that was really what we were paying for. But the HOA had particulars. You couldn't put this up in your backyard. You couldn't do this. You couldn't do that. You know. So
And even neighborhoods without HOAs, a lot of times newer construction neighborhoods have deed restrictions that you need to make your buyers aware of. You know, like some neighborhoods, you can't have a car in the driveway that doesn't have a license plate on it. Or you can't park your boat in your driveway.
or your RV, or have a big
your RV.
giant
And that's
place
not-
thing.
That's just deed restrictions. That's not considered an HOA or a condo. Tim, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say I'm going through that process right now for looking for a home, and one home, for instance, within the neighborhood, you can only have in-ground pools. So that was something that came up that we had asked.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of listing agents don't even know.
that was going to be my next point, is that listing agents, whose responsibility is it if you're taking a buyer around and your listing agent doesn't know there's deed restrictions or an HOA? Whose responsibility is it? Cheryl? Natalie too?
Sorry, I can't figure out how to change it. It would be ours because we're representing the buyer anyway, and we're in their best interest. So it's our job to find that out.
Absolutely correct. So to change your name, up in the top right corner, if you hover your mouse, you'll see 3 little dots. If you click on it, you can rename yourself.
I'm trying to find it, but go on,
Okay.
I'll figure it out.
I know who you are. So this is your responsibility. One of the nice things that's happened, HOA documents used to be like this giant pack of papers, and you'd have to go get a copy and you'd have to go read through them. Now they're pretty much online almost everywhere, and you can print them out if your client wants them to, and it may not be a bad idea to present to them when they move in. Here's a copy, a physical copy for them to review, to give to them, print it off at your office, because they're like 50 pages.
And call the town, because the town will know if the listing agent doesn't. So yeah, I mean, like I live in a single family house, but it's in an HOA. So you need to know. I mean, there's mandatory fees.
I don't think we've made enough of calling your town this time around. Your town is your best friend. You should get very familiar with calling your town for permits, calling your town to find out, is there anything going on in town that you don't know about? When's the zoning board? When are the town meetings? And you should start to pop up at town meetings, whether they're virtual. A lot of them are doing them virtually.
And also, as soon as you call, identify yourself by name as a realtor for Howard Hanna. There'll be more, and you know, if it's open, you know, go and introduce yourself. If it's in an area that you want to be doing business in, you know, hand them your business card, you know, whatever. Because yeah, they are a wealth of information, and if they have a face to put with the name, that's always helpful. But just always be sure to identify yourself as a realtor.
Yeah, but they'll give you lots of information. Sometimes they'll tell you, like in some towns, they'll email you a copy of a permit. Some of them will say only the owner can do that. And if that's the case, then just have the owner call and get them and then share them with you. It's very quick. I usually get permits within a couple of hours. And if you're in some rural areas, you may find your town, some of the offices may only be open on Thursday from 1 to 3. Seriously. And so you have to learn those hours, keep a log somewhere of when things are open so that you're not chasing your tail all the time. You know when to call people. Make it a lot easier. Put it somewhere where you can keep it, whether it's handwritten or on your phone or in a document on your computer, but keep that information when you find it out. And every time somebody gets elected, those hours could change, because a lot of those people have a full-time job. It depends on them individually. Excuse me. Really having a problem with my voice this morning. Appraisal contingency. Somebody know what this means? What does this mean? This would be about a mortgage.
That it's contingent upon the appraisal of the home appraising to value.
So if, and this is one of those places where that little check mark on your contract where it says mortgage contingency must have that little check mark that's a mortgage contingency. If that, let's say you're putting $20,000 down on a house, but the house under appraised by 30 or 40,000, if that you aren't clear on your mortgage contingency and your requirements, could come back and say, you need to come up with that difference, and they'll be upside down. So if you've done your paperwork properly, your buyer's protected by the appraisal contingency. So what usually happens is if it comes in its low appraisal, there'll be some more negotiation. And you'll either come together or you won't. But it isn't in your buyer's best interest to buy in a house they're going to be hugely upside down on.
There is the occasion, I mean, it used to be in the good old days, bad old days, whatever, that if you had a relationship with the bank, then the bank could pick and choose the appraiser. Can't do that anymore. It's randomized, which means that occasionally, very occasionally, you get an appraisal that's just totally wrong, like not even close to being correct. Get with your manager and get with the bank. There are exceptions where you can either plead your case or ask for another appraisal to be done. It's relatively rare, but sometimes you get somebody coming into a rural area from an urban area, an appraiser, who all have to be licensed, but who just does not understand that geographic area.
Yeah.
So it happens occasionally. Everybody will freak out. Again, don't lose sight of the end game, and there are ways around that. So don't try and go that alone. So there have been times where, and I always met the appraiser, handed him my comps, was always a man. That's a lie. I had one woman once. They're not supposed to take the comps. They're not supposed to rely on your comps. Said here, just for reference, if you have any interest, sometimes they won't even acknowledge you. They won't talk to you. They won't pick up the papers, leave them on the kitchen counter and wait outside. I almost guarantee you that they will have picked it up and taken them, because you're making their job easier. I mean, they are licensed appraisers. Yes, they have to do their due diligence, but if you can help them out, I never, knock on wood, ever had something not appraised. And, when you're looking through the appraisal after the fact, it's like, oh, look, they used all my comps.
Yeah, so I take my comps. I also take, if you've gotten multiple offers, I have all the offers stacked on the counter in the kitchen. So I put all the offers there. I have I have all my comps laid out, like a deck of cards fanned out. I greet them at the door. I was taught that this is the most important showing you have. I get there first. I have all the lights on. I have all the doors open. I have it very easy for them to walk through. I just say hello, welcome. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask me. And then I shut up and I stand in a different room and I just let them do their thing. Many, many times I've had them say, oh, are these your comps? So yeah, can I have them? You bet. Yeah, I bought them for you. I don't say that. We're not supposed to try to influence the appraiser, so just.
Yeah, and some appraisers can be super rude.
Yep.
So don't take offense because they have their job to do. But I am a firm believer that, if anybody can help anybody out with some good information, what's the harm in that? So, they don't have to take it or use it, but you, as the other licensed professional, should, I think it's important to try and move everything along as smoothly as possible.
And you'll have lots of agents and even managers who say, oh, I never meet an appraiser. They've got a super key, let them in. They'll let themselves in. It's your
That's a
listing.
mistake.
I don't do that. I'm always there. So don't listen to what other people do. Make your own decisions. But Jen and I both believe equally here that you should be there. But don't try to influence them. That's not kosher. Home inspections, repairs, requests. You need to know what home inspections you need. That the people who are doing the inspections, they can have Uncle Bob, who's nothing, do their home inspection. Their report isn't so powerful, especially if they're asking for requests and repairs. So hopefully you have inspectors that are qualified. When it comes to mold, they have to be New York State certified, and it has to be sent to a New York State certified lab. And that is not part of a normal home inspection. That is an additional inspection that has to be checked. A regular home inspector may come in and say, I found something that's suspicious and I think you're going to want to get a mold assessment. That's going to be a continuation. It's going to be a new addendum. You're going to ask for an additional inspection. We found something that we'd like to have inspected. And mold, if they suspect mold, if it's a certified ASHI, American Society of Home Inspectors, they're pretty well trained. They do CE like regular realtors do. If they say they think it's mold, it's and that's all they can say. This is suspicious. I think you should get a mold inspection. If they say that, I'm getting it because it's a health and safety issue. And I don't want people moving in where there's mold. And they're pretty careful about mold. They don't call on that very often. Yeah, Jen?
Well, around here, it feels like every house has mold. And radon too. Radon's still a thing. And radon canisters need to get dropped and sit for, what is it? Is it 2 days?
2 to 3.
even
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. 48 to
So,
72 hours.
If an inspector's really on their game, they'll drop it 2 or 3 days before the inspection instead of having to come out after the fact. But, either way, but just remember that the buyer is the one who's paying for the home inspection. So it's the buyer's report. They paid for it, it's theirs. Do they have to share it with the seller? They paid for it, it's theirs.
If they're asking for something, they would share the section that they're asking for, the photo and that what the inspector said, but not the whole report.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. If they had to, obviously, if something comes back on the home inspection and we're made aware of it, and the deal falls through because, sellers and buyers don't agree, that then has to be disclosed if you relist just what you've been privy to, correct?
Yep, and you're going to see some listing agents who don't do it.
And also, make sure the sellers know that if this deal falls apart because of this issue with your home, you're still stuck with the home with the issue. So it's like, how are we going to fix this going forward? Because if somebody picks it up once in an inspection, it's going to get picked up all along. And yes, your duty is you have to disclose it. So it's got to get fixed or something along the way. And, again, adds to the moving parts.
So using old car, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, and reasonable care. You're a listing agent, a buyer's come through, they've found something that's a health, safety, or structural issue that's defective. It should be disclosed. Your deal fell apart. You're putting it back into active status, and your seller says, I don't want you to put that in the MLS. Using old car, what is your responsibility?
Well, your responsibility is to disclose.
Yeah.
It is. So some people will say, well, no, obedience, they told me not to. So obedience is anything that's legal. Okay? What you're doing is not legal, does not follow fair housing, and does not follow ethics. So you're bound by ethics and fair housing also. And so when you get those reports, that's what you have to say to somebody. If they that you have the responsibility to disclose, it's part of your licensure, and that you will disclose. And
Hey,
that's going to
Maggie.
affect any coming deals. Yeah, who's talking?
It's Cheryl.
Oh, hi, Cheryl.
Hi. So if a deal fell through and you're putting the house, back on the market, would you have your clients fill out a brand new disclosure, or do you note it on the one that they've already completed? And how do you go about that? Like if there was a major problem that you needed to disclose the second time around?
You can do it either way as long as it's initialed and signed, but yeah, you do have to write it up. So you could do a secondary one, or you could just write on it and have it initialed and signed and dated.
And this is where the beauty of having a pre-inspection done. If you're the listing agent, now you can see the homeowner, the sellers knows now what's wrong with their house. And so they can either disclose it or disclose it and fix it.
And
So,
if they've been in their house more than 10 years, that's a really good thing to do. More than 5, still a good thing. Under 2, they may have an inspection report that you could look over, ask to look it over and see if there was anything that was kind of iffy 5 years ago, 2 years ago. Is it changed? Then you may want an inspection. I think it's always a good idea, but tell them if it's going to get discovered anyway, why don't we discover it and take care of it now, or decide what we're going to do about it now. People are really pretty reasonable most of the time. And if you present it in a well-educated way, they're more likely to go with it. If you're tentative, they're tentative. If you're confident, they're confident. And so another thing, home inspection, repairs, seller's response. How many days do they have to respond? How many days do the buyer have to respond to the seller's response? This is a countering period. So don't make them too long, but also give them time to get good information. 48 hours maybe. 12 hours is not enough. You don't have time to consider things, get somebody in to take a look at it and see if they're, off their nut. Because every once in a while you get something that's just kind of, wonky. And so sometimes they can get somebody else in to take a peek. End of inspection contingency period. You have to know when this period is over. Some inspections can take a week to order. Some can take 21 days, like a well inspection, depending on what area you live in. So you need to know, what are the timeframes for different types of inspections? How long does it take to get a mold certified inspector in? How long does it take to get a radon test? I had a radon test. I'm so sorry. I had a radon test on a property several years ago. There was radon. It was pretty high. They got radon remediation. We asked to have a test afterward, which is a different type of test. It's a charcoal test, and it sits around for a week, and then it gets mailed off to some lab in Canada. And that process takes like 10 days. Closing was delayed by 4 or 5 days because the listing agent forgot to order the test. And then she dropped the ball, and I said, where is it? And then she lied to me and told me that it had been done and we'd have results on 2 days from now. And it doesn't work that way. So you need to understand how all of that works. Because the first test is a digital test. The second test is not. It's what they call it, a charcoal test, I think. And it takes longer. There's a processing that's very different. So you need to build in the time for those things. Had she done everything on time, we would have been fine, but she didn't. And had she not lied about it, I could have said to my client, she forgot to order the test. She's ordering it now. It'll be in. We're going to be delayed. They were highly emotional people. It was not a good thing. We did close, but it was fraught.
And that's just a great illustration of, don't lie. You're going to, along the way, your back's going to be against the wall. And that's the easy way out. Don't do it, because it's just, don't do it. And people will be much more forgiving, because we are all humans and everybody makes mistakes. Own it and fix it.
And the reason I knew she lied is because of the paper trail. There were receipts involved, because when you have remediation, there's a receipt that you want to get for your buyer, because it's a 10-year on some parts and 2 years on some other parts of the radon. So the test ordering and all of those dates were all revealed. So anyway, she got caught because of the paper trail. There is a paper trail, so don't lie. Just suck it up and take it. Agreed upon repairs and timeline. So if they said they were going to do the repairs, when were they done? And then if you're the listing agent, make sure you're getting that to the buyer's agent as soon as it's done, so that they can remove the contingency. Utility transfer. You need to let your clients know what utilities need to be: water, electric, gas, maybe propane, maybe oil. That those need to be transferred in name. They don't get shut off and shut on and turned on. That's a whole different thing. And it takes more time and it costs more money to shut it off and turn it on. It's just transferring. And it's very quick and easy with some phone calls, which would be great for you to have a list of numbers phone numbers that people need. What's the number for all of the electric companies in your area? What's the gas numbers? Who are the propane? Whenever I see a propane tank, here's my tip, because this is, and this is because I had a problem once. I couldn't find who the propane company was that delivered to this property, and the owner, who had been off site for several years and out of state, couldn't remember. I called 40 propane companies before I found the one that delivered the propane to this property. So now, as soon as I see a propane tank, I take a picture of the tank. Why? Because the name of the company that delivered it is on it, and so is their phone number. So, and I don't rely on them for the information. I call and I say, how much propane? How much was it last winter? How much, what was the bill last year? What was the bill the year before? Because winters are different, so the bills may be different. If I had an especially cold winter, it might be higher. So I can get a better average for somebody that's moving in and has oil or propane. It can be nice to have like a 2-year average. Agreed upon repairs, other contingencies, utilities, let's see, repairs, inspections, and walkthroughs. So when something's been repaired, you may have asked to have a look-see after it's done. They may do that at final. And that's going to depend on the deal and your clients and all that and what's being asked for. Closing and possession dates. By and large, the best closing and possession date is after you've closed. Pre-possession and post-possession is problematic. And lawyers in New York State don't like it anymore. It used to be very common. We're going to move in 2 weeks early and we're just going to prorate and pay you this amount of money. We're going to post date and we're going to let them stay and we're going to move in 2 weeks later. It's very problematic. And it's much better to have your possession on the date of closing. Jen? Anything?
Yeah, I would say most attorneys really try not to do that. Just for, think about it. If you let a buyer occupy a home before they officially own it, we all know, it always cracks me up how little time people spend in the houses they're going to buy. It's like they spend more time in the car they're going to buy than they do the house they're going to buy. So if somebody moves into a house, and we've all lived either in apartments or houses where, you're in it for a month and you know now where the floor creaks, what door doesn't stay open. That's why they had that door stop there. The washing machine could go, the dishwasher could go. There's lots of things that can happen during that time frame. And the buyer's like, I don't own it yet. It's not my responsibility. So that's how attorneys are just like, if you can avoid it at all costs, it's best. Sometimes you're getting down to the wire and they're like, well, can we move all of our things into the garage if there is one. You know, sometimes that's acceptable. But it's just, it can be a real nightmare because it's like, all right, you know, who's going to cough up a homeowner's policy, or are you going to do a renter's policy for 2 weeks, or, you know, whatever. It's not a great scenario. I mean, it is done, but I would say very reluctantly on the attorney's behalf.
Yeah, it used to be really common. It is not common anymore. So don't go in looking for that. There's a phrase you're going to get yourself comfortable with both buyers and sellers is, do you have a temporary housing alternative? Can you move in with someone, or can you do month to month for a little while if you're needing to wait? You'd be surprised. I've had many people find lots of alternative housing and not with a lot of fight. They're like, yeah, I can do that. I can move in with my brother for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2. I'll hate them when I'm done, but I can do it. The last one is that attorney, other third-party approvals. So if you need approvals on anything, what are the dates? What are the times? Everything has to be specified in the purchase offer, followed. If that date has to be missed, do you just miss it? Well, we just couldn't get it together. No, you have got to have a continuation, which is a separate piece of paper, and it has to be written up and agreed on by all parties. Then it has to be delivered into everybody's hands to be fully executed. Yeah, Shauna?
Who writes up the continuation? Is it whoever is, fell short?
Yeah. So if it's the listing agent says, we can't do this by this date for this reason, they would write it up. But it's you've got to keep getting, mostly it's going to come from the buyer's agent. But yeah, you've got to have continuations. And if you don't know who's needs to write it, who do you go back to?
Manager.
Your
You go
manager.
back to your manager.
Always go back to your manager. So if your manager, and who owns, if you have a listing or you have a buyer, who really represents them legally?
The broker?
The broker.
Broker and attorney.
The broker, not the attorney, the broker. They're the brokers.
And
They're
just
not
one little
yours.
blurb about attorneys. Attorneys don't make very much money on real estate deals at all. They make the money on the title if they're doing the title, but even adding the title and what they charge for a closing, just be aware that don't say, let's leave it up to the attorneys, because attorneys don't care if it closes or not. They have very, very little skin in the game. We as realtors have the biggest amount of skin in the game. And yes, it's always broker to broker, but just be ready to go to bat for your people and don't necessarily just rely on the attorney, because the attorney has the least amount of skin in the game. Yes, they're representing your client, but at the end of the day, you're doing all the work and you're getting paid more than they are, a lot more.
A lot more. So, an attorney charges usually between $400 and $600 for the average deal. It can be more if there's more moving parts, but it's about $400 to $600. It's not a lot of money. And they have paralegals they're paying and, keeping the lights on and rent and all that stuff. They do a lot of deals, that's true, but they don't make a lot of money. So just make sure you have all these dates. Again, those buyer-seller responsibilities, talk to your manager, walk through dates in your area. Every area has little nuances on things, but talk about hard and fast dates. Learn your contracts. Closing calendar. Who's the lender? Who's the closing company? Who's the home inspector? Who's the insurer? This is a nice little form. I like this. What was the sale price? Seller assist. We call it concessions. So who knows what a concession is? Other than Shauna, I know Shauna knows because she's been in banking. So who else? Cheryl?
I think it's when closing costs and other costs are rolled into the mortgage and kind of brings down the amount that the seller walks away with, but everything kind of gets rolled in to make it affordable for the buyer, maybe?
Yeah, it's the net to seller is lower. So if I have a $100,000 house, I've gotten 3% concessions, which would be $3,000, right? it's going to help toward closing costs, or it may help them buy living room furniture. There isn't anything that it's deemed that they have to sell it, but if they've asked for seller concession, it comes out of the proceeds, what the offer was to the seller, comes out of the seller's proceeds to help the buyer at closing. So they have less money out of pocket at the closing table.
But
And-
usually it's added into the net. So it's in that example, the new sale price would be 103. So the seller isn't out money. They're just making this concession to the buyer to help them out. But at the end of the day, their net is what they want, is their agreed upon number. And the only caveat is that you got to make sure it appraises.
And make sure you're doing all your math. I had a deal a while ago, quite a while ago, where there were concessions offered, or concessions that were wanted on the part of the buyer. And then we were going back and forth and countering, and I was talking to the attorney, and he's like, well, yeah, but now they're going to get this amount of money. And I said, have you used your calculator? Because this is this much. It was like $16,000 less. And he's like, what? And I said, let's do the math together. And so I showed him, he goes, oh, I didn't do it like that. I said, I know, but that says, no, we're not taking that deal. And he's like, oh, it seemed like a good deal to me. I said, it does, until you do the math. You must do the math, and you must understand how to do the math. The math is really, really important when you're writing deals. So what are these percentages? You need to actually write down all the numbers and do all the math. And if you don't know how to do the math, sit with your manager. If they're a manager and they don't know how to do the math, I don't know how they got to be a manager. I would hope that all of them know how to do this. If they don't know, guess who else knows? Math on a mortgage, who you calling?
The
A
loan
loan
officer?
officer, whether you're on the listing side or the buyer side, call a loan officer that you have a good relationship with. They'll do the math for you. And they'll say, oh yeah. And then have them walk you through how they did it so you can do it for yourself. It's a good skill to have. Contract executed. That means signed and delivered. Hand money, we call it earnest deposit. Mortgage application deadline. So a mortgage application in our contracts in Western New York, Jen, ours says immediately, shall be applied for immediately upon acceptance. Does yours say the same thing?
I think so.
So that means if I did it at Friday at 5 o'clock, when is immediately? Is bank open on Saturday? If bank's open on Saturday, it's Saturday morning. If I wrote it Saturday at 5 o'clock, it's Monday morning, because there's nobody there on Sunday. But it's immediate. Get it to them as quickly as possible. Am I waiting till Monday morning? No, I'm sending it over. I'm sending it over. I don't wait, because guess what happens when you wait?
You miss out.
Well, you forget, or you delay, or, squirrel. You get
Yeah, bad things
distracted.
happen. Bad things happen.
Don't wait. Just take care of things right in the moment. Because when you don't, it's a real problem. It just really is. Let's see. Buyer inspection, home inspection. If there was one, when was it scheduled? Buyer's inspection reply. So this is a nice sheet. Everything is here. You can use one like this, or you can create one of your own.
I always liked to print off an actual 3 months worth of a calendar. It's a great illustration for buyers and sellers to sort of show them how this is going to hopefully go. So, visually, but either way is good as long as you have one that everybody's on the same page with.
Yeah, so keep your calendars and keep them up to date. As soon as I have a contract that's been accepted, I pull out my trusty phone. I pull out my paper calendar, because I use both. I write the dates in my paper calendar. I put all the dates in my phone. I put a date. So if I have a mortgage if I have attorney approval, I put a reminder in the day before that it's due, and I call them if I haven't gotten it and say, hey, just check in. I call the paralegal and I say, hey, I'm just checking. We sent you I always, I put everything in my calendar and I put a date ahead of the due date to check in. I get to know my paralegals pretty well throughout a contract, and I recommend that you do that, because if they like you and you're up on top of things, there was one that was really, we were having problems all over the place, and I was calling people 5-6 times a day because it was necessary to get this to move along. It was unusual. I don't recommend doing that. In this case, I needed to. And I would say, I'm sorry, I hate to be a nudge. And they go, no, I'm just really happy you're keeping up on it, because it was a survey that was not getting done, and I was calling everybody. And because I had kept on top of it, the bank attorney said, I never do this, but I'm going to schedule the closing and pray to God the survey comes in the morning. And it did. And she was like, phew. But she did, she scheduled the closing, because we had been told from every single person that mattered that it was going to be there. And she trusted me. So make sure you're building good relationships. And if you're being a nudge, apologize for being a nudge and be very gracious. I also dropped off a tray of bagels at the office one morning because I knew I was being a nudge. Successfully navigating the inspection contingency period. Educate the buyer in advance. What's the phrase we've been using for weeks now? Set what? What do you need to set?
Expectations.
That's the word. Set expectations. If they know before they ever write an offer what the expectations are, you are in so much better position. One of my managers in my area locally, when she's at an open house and there's an unrepresented buyer, the first thing she asks them is, has anybody gone over a purchase offer contract with you? Their answer is almost invariably no. And she said, well, as soon as this is over at 3 o'clock, I'm available. Do you want to meet me at my office at 4 and I'll go over a purchase offer contract with you? Yeah, that'd be great. Guess what? She's just picked up a buyer, and a buyer for life, because it gives them those expectations in the first moments, and she tells them what it is and how it works. So set expectations. Remind them there is no perfect home. We've talked about that. The 80-10-10 home in this market, it might be the 70-15-15 home. I don't know. Demonstrate what a home inspection is and is not by showing a sample. Once you have some inspections, you may be able to show a sample. Redact the addresses, take a black marker and the names. Get rid of the address and the name of the person. Show them what it looks like. They're like 90 pages long. I show them on my computer. I don't print them out. But if I did print one out, I would just have the same one and I would just use it over and over again. Educate sellers in advance. Remind them there are at least 2 steps to negotiation. There can be many steps to negotiation. You can negotiate at the time of the offer and the counter offer. You can be negotiating on each and every contingency. And you may have many, depending on the home. You may have to negotiate at the time of appraisal. So there can be many steps to negotiation. Show them what the average seller concession is for the neighborhood, seller market, price range. How are you going to show them that? How am I going to show them what the average seller concession is for the neighborhood, the market area, and the price range?
Through your comps?
Maybe. Where else? It's part of it, Tim. You're on the right track. Yeah, Shauna?
In the seller interview, like when you go into the MLS and obtain closed listings, sales.
So it's to show average seller concessions for the neighborhood, the market area, and the price. This is only sold. And you're going to go into your MLS, and it doesn't matter about appraising for the same style. But on that street, or the 2 or 3 streets of similar age, style, builder. If you're looking at everything for the last couple of years, you can see the sold price. You can see the concession price in the MLS because it's printed, usually, if the agent has done their homework, has done it right. And it'll show you the difference between the sell price and the list price. And it's a deeper dive than a comp. It's very valid. This is a part about being a local expert. I would guess less than 2% of agents have ever done this. Jen, you think it's a higher number?
Sadly, no. And, you know, in this market, you know, there's a lot of, you know, fast and loose agents out there just throwing deals together because they can, because there's, you know, the inventory is so limited and the buyers are, you know, standing in line. This too will pass. It's been like this for, gosh, 2.5 years now. So it's
longer, I think.
It's passing. It will pass. Interest rates will go up. You know, things will, it's all, you know, we live in a cycle. History does repeat itself over and over again.
So what's easier, to develop a good habit or to break a bad habit?
Develop a good one.
Develop a good habit from day one. And right now, most realtors are developing terrible habits because they think this is how it's going to be for the rest of their life. And when it turns into a buyer market, they're going to be lost. I was going to use another word, but I'm not going to use that word. They're going to be lost because they are not going to know how to respond, and they are not going to know their actual market. All they know how to do right now is write a contract and get it, push it through. And that's okay, but that's not going to help them in a buyer's market. And you're going to see when it does switch, they're going to drop like stones. They will not be able to navigate the new waters. If you have developed your good habits starting on day one, you're going to be in a much better position. And that's not, and I'm absolutely sincere in that. Develop good habits, be the best possible realtor you can be on all levels. Local expert, there's no replacement for being the local expert. Everybody in your, go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to make a comment that my mentor, Johnny DiGusaldo, actually showed me a process that he goes through. Is he actually took the listing that we have right now. He took the street. He started off with the street. It's a corner lot, the street that it's on, and then the street going down alongside it, and just kind of see what the average prices were. And that's how he started his process for the seller side. And then he went into the comps in the area that were similar in nature. And it didn't depend on, it's a ranch. He looked at colonials and things like that, just to kind of get an idea of age, the beds, baths, and everything like that. So it was a good process to go through, and it definitely helped.
Yeah, there's a very big difference between getting comps and being the local expert. On the local expert, you're looking at the broad field of every house, of every tile, of every condition in a neighborhood, and you're assessing it that way. Comps are more specific, but you need to know both. Because first of all, your sellers and your buyers don't understand. You're only looking at this tile of house. They're like, but the ranch down the house, and you're looking at a colonial. Well, the Tudor sold for $480,000. So shouldn't I be able to sell for $480,000? No, you can't sell your 1,200 square foot ranch for $1,200, for the price $480 that you got for the Tudor from, So you need to know, because they don't.
Yeah.
And they don't. And when you know details, and like I think it was Jen said the other day, if you go into the tax record and write down their names, the client who owns that house, that neighbor, the James's house, or Johnson's house, it makes a huge difference to people. You sound so professional. You sound so educated. Guess what? You are, because you've done the work. You've done the homework. So there's a couple things. There's many layers to real estate. And you can just go along here and you might have an average career. If you are working in all the layers, you're going to have a very robust career, and you'll be an expert. I want to know everything. I hope you do too. It's going to help your clients. And besides, it's more fun for you. It's kind of interesting. Discuss options for monetary credit. So people can get a credit if they have concessions. You need to talk to your loan officer. What's the maximum amount they can get? Because concessions and credits, there's a maximum. You can't have one and then add more to it. You can only have a maximum amount. And if it doesn't fall within that maximum amount, you've got to negotiate a different deal. So having repairs done and offering a price reduction. Sometimes people will say, we might say, we need a new panel box. Well, we'll give you a $2,500 credit for that. Some will say, okay, we'll take care of it. If you're asking for the repair, you may, as the buyer's agent, write in licensed electrician, New York State licensed electrician to do that service. A homeowner can. In my house, my husband would do it because he's got the background. I wouldn't want every homeowner to do their own. They don't know what they're doing. But when it comes to hooking it up outside, then a master electrician from the town has to come and do that part. So there's certain things that you don't have a say-so on, but make sure your language is precise. Does that make sense to everybody? If you don't know what you should be asking for, who are you going back to?
Your manager.
Yeah, Marnie, I can see. Perfect.
Just
Yeah,
a few
you're always
things we're
going-
drilling into you.
Yeah, so when you get an inspection report, who are you taking the inspection report to first before you take it to your client? In your case, you're taking it to your manager so they can help you read through it, so they can help you understand it. They can help you say, yeah, this looks important. It's not that big a deal. Here's how you'll discuss it. So they'll give you some tracks to talk to your clients because your clients are going to freak out. What we call a really clean inspection report to a buyer looks like the house is falling down. Oh my God, there's so much wrong. Oh my God, how am I going to get this house? Why would, oh, it's horrible. And you're like, no, this is a really clean report. Are you kidding? No, this is great. I'm ecstatic. Really? Yep. But it says this, yeah, that's normal. It's a house. Guess what? Welcome to home ownership. You don't have a landlord anymore. You don't have a maintenance man that's going to come in and fix these things. These are you. And guess that's home ownership. I heard last night from people who bought a house a couple years ago, and they're like, Maggie, we think we have a roof leak. I say, well, I know there's a transferable warranty, and I know that I remember the roofer's name. It was this person, this company. Let me go find the transferable warranty. It should be in your paperwork, but I'll go to mine. I'll get it. Took a picture, sent it to him. They called the guy. He came out. He looked. He said, yeah, it's not the roof. You got a damming problem, and it's from something else. But knowing people and knowing your contracts and knowing how things work and being there, being a resource for your people after the event. She said, I'm sorry to bother you. I said, you're not bothering me. Just because we closed 2 years ago, I'm here for you. You need help, call me. That's my job. That's my responsibility. So make sure you're just keeping up with things. Remind sellers about stigmatized properties, disclosures, and market time. What's a stigmatized property?
Neighborhood it's in, or something that's nearby, like a power plant or anything like that.
A death in the house.
Yeah, when I was 19, I worked for an insurance company, and somebody was moving into the area, and he said, can you take a ride with me? Because he knew I had grown up in this area. He says, and he drove me by this house. He says, can you tell me what's wrong with this house? I can't understand. It was like half the price of every other house in the area. And I said, yeah, you don't want to move in there. And he says, why? And I said, I don't want to tell you, but your wife won't want to live there. And it was a site of a violent crime. And it was awful. And I had to tell him, and he's like, oh my God. He says, don't they have to tell people? And back then they didn't. And now they still don't. And it was a very violent crime. He only didn't know about it because he wasn't from the state. because pretty much throughout the state, it had hit the news. It was a big deal.
And that's, go Google is your friend. There's a reason why a house is half the price of all the other houses around it. Find out what that is. To do your diligence, Google the address. And yeah, if there was a violent crime, a newspaper article will come up. And, some people are like, I don't care. I'm cool with that. But, it's information.
Yeah. And in this case, the wife would have, there would have been a second violent crime if she'd found out. Yeah, it was really pretty horrific. Anyway, you don't have to tell people if there's ghosts. It's a haunted house. Some people want a haunted house. Can you speak to a haunted house? Not really. You don't really know, right? So stigmatized properties, give people resources to go to find out if that's a neighborhood. If you think it might not be a neighborhood that they're going to feel comfortable in, but you're trying to stay away from redlining, steering, and fair housing issues, the way I like to handle that is go to the neighborhood at 8 o'clock in the morning and walk the neighborhood. Come back at 5 o'clock. Come back at 9 o'clock at night and walk the neighborhood and see how you feel. Because at the end of the day, it's up to you. It doesn't matter what I think. Look up, give them references to find out where the crime maps, like there's almost every city has a crime map and it'll tell you what types of crimes happen. Guess what? Crime happens everywhere, including high-end neighborhoods, maybe especially high-end neighborhoods. So there's no neighborhood without it. So, and they're going to see that when they go to those, it's like, oh, but if there's pockets, if they feel comfortable, that's fine.
Can I just,
Yeah, please do.
take it away from the crime and back to, check a house out in all different times of the day. Sort of a funny story, but if you think about it, if a house, say you've got a road that is a T and the house at the end, so, cars can come down here and they can go either right or left. The house that sits right here, I always called the headlight house. Think about it. If you're, every car that comes down that street, the headlights are going to shine right into the front windows of that house. You're not necessarily going to realize that at 10 o'clock in the morning or even 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, use that as an example. It doesn't talk about crime. It doesn't talk about, any of that stuff, but the headlight house, keep that in mind to recommend that buyers check the place out. I mean, some neighborhoods have streetlights that the either town or the neighborhood association or whatever has put in those halogen lights that are so bright that, that could be a thing. So I think it is a good idea to recommend that people go, drive by a house and use the headlight house as an example, because it's a pretty innocuous thing to get people to sort of think a little outside of the box and make a
Jennifer, it's funny you say that, because in my neighborhood there's one house that's always up for sale in the 10 years that I've been here. And then the one day it dawned on me when I was driving to go swim at 5 o'clock in the morning, how our lights are always shining into those bedrooms upstairs. I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if that was the reason. I'm like, that would drive me crazy.
Yeah, and that's just one of those little crazy things that you don't know until you've closed and moved in. So yeah, the headlight house story.
That's and when you're doing the crime, when you're giving them a resource to go to the crime map, I don't talk about crime. I just give it to them as a resource with a bunch of other resources. I might give them the school districts and the crime map and this and that, and a bunch of other things, and let them deal with it. And if they ask me straight out, I say, here's a resource where you can find that out. I don't speak to it, or you can call the local police department and get that information. They can call. Pre-inspections are always an option. We've talked about that. You understand our feelings on that, I think. So always, for both sides of the transaction, review inspection reports in person to be able to evaluate body language, facial expression, and tone of voice. That means with your client. So you're reviewing those not over the phone. You are reviewing those in person. If
you're able.
you're not able, Zoom, so you can see them. If you can't do that, phone is the last resource. But in person whenever possible.
And like Maggie said, it is true. They're pretty daunting if you've never seen one before. Yeah, even the cleanest house, the photographs of the basement look scary. You know, the zooming in of the pilot light on the furnace looks scary. I mean, it can be so many things that are really super off-putting. So, you know, just warn them to say, hey, this is a 90-page report. You've got zoomed in photographs that look like something out of, you know, whatever, but it's just your soon to be basement. It's all good. You know, these are the highlights and the low lights. Don't get freaked out by it.
Yeah, expectations. Use office closing checklist, create your own, and use Engage CRM sales flow. Buyer agent. Get your earnest deposit into the office administrator by the end of the day following receipt. Sooner the better. And it can be a personal check. That comes up a lot. Here's a tip on personal checks. Read them before you submit them. Is the amount of money correct? Does the written amount match the handwritten dollar amount? You know, if it says $1,000, is it handwritten $1,000 and no cents, or 100s? Did they sign it? Did they date it? In the memo line, have them write the address for the property. Take a photograph of it. Have your admin send a copy of the check to the listing agent, or it should go to the listing agent, the buyer's agent, and both attorneys. Shows receipt, shows a date. Scan them in, send them off. Make sure those are being done. Will your admin do that automatically if you give them a check? No.
Depends.
They won't do anything automatically because generally they don't do anything automatically because everybody does their business differently. So you need to ask specifically for what you need to have done. And that should just be your method. You should always ask your admin to do whatever you want them to do and be specific on what you want them to do and when. Then they'll do it. They try to stay out of trouble, and for some people, if they do it, an agent can come back and, I didn't tell you to do that. And somebody else is saying, I thought you were going to do that. And it's the same thing. So be specific and talk to them. Just have the conversation, then you know everybody's on the same page. Communication, it's a miracle. Contact the loan officer about the mortgage application. Hey, Shauna, this is Maggie Knapp from Howard Hanna. I'm sending over we wrote an offer, got accepted. I'm sending you the mortgage application. When I send anything that's important, I put in an email, like stars, asterisks, whatever, across the top. Please acknowledge receipt of this email in big bold letters, especially to attorneys and loan officers. Why? They get a bazillion things. If yours is missed, you're not going to know about it if they haven't acknowledged receipt. So what do I get? This has been received. Thanks. Got it. It's short, sweet, to the point. It's fine. It's all I need. Because now I have a written paper trail that they received it. So they can't come back and say, well, I didn't know. I didn't get it. Yeah, you did. Remind the buyer that the loan officer will be contacting them. Advise the client to call Howard Hanna Insurance for a homeowner's quote. We do have homeowners insurance that covers everything. They can get pet insurance. They can get everything. They can bundle. It's like any other insurance. If they bundle, they might get a lower price. It's a quote. That's all it is. They're not committed. It may save them some money. And it's one-stop shopping. People like that. They don't have to do it. They're not required to do it. But if you tell one person, how many people do you have to tell?
And if there's a mortgage, everybody
them.
ultimately does
Sure.
need a binder or declaration page. with a paid receipt for a full year. Just to put that out there.
Say
Yep.
that again. I'm sorry. What did you say exactly?
All buyers who are getting mortgages need a homeowner's policy, proof of insurance,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
which, and it has to be paid in full for the full year. So usually it's either a binder. Most every attorney in the universe in New York now finally accepts insurance binders. Oh, sorry. Yes, and paid receipts.
Mhm.
So just, and usually people do that. That's something that happens pretty close to the end. But again, clue them in now so that they know that that's something on their list of to-dos. And let's see.
Cheryl,
had
yeah, I just saw her question. So yeah, Cheryl, $500 great on a $50,000 house.
rule of thumb is make sure it covers your commission.
Okay. That 500 was honestly, what we put down on a much more expensive house, the first house we bought. And I was shocked. And she was like, nope, that's good. And then, it swung the complete opposite way in other times. So I was wondering, is it a 10% that you usually ask, or 20, or?
Ask your manager what the norm is in your area. Like Maggie said, if it's a really low priced home, you don't have to have, a very big deposit. But in this market that we're in now, the bigger the deposit, the stronger the offer.
Okay.
So, and it also, it shows I'm willing to put 10 grand of my skin in the game. That's how badly I want this house. And it may be $100,000 house. So, it shows that, I'm not scraping coins out of my couch to buy this house. I've got the 10 grand that's been seasoned and sitting in my bank accounts. So, for on the buyer's side, more is better because it's a commitment. So if the deal falls apart, usually they'll get that money back, but it shows super good faith and very strong position. And, rule of thumb, that's how I was always taught, make sure it at least covers your commission.
Yeah, and it's like she said, if I've got $10,000 in, I'm not going to walk away and change my mind. I'm committed to this. Can the seller determine the amount? No, the buyer makes the offer, but the seller doesn't have to accept. If I have two very similar offers, but somebody's putting up $1,000 deposit and somebody's putting up a $10,000 deposit, even if it's a lower price, which one am I taking? I'm taking the one with the 10,000 because I know they're in. 1,000, I'm not feeling the love. Do
You
I have
can
to let the
ask.
others? Yeah, I don't. And I don't, as a listing agent, as the seller, I don't have to reveal to the other party what that other deposit was. I can, I don't have to.
Tim's comment, if anybody wants to see it in the chat, a suggestion to me was on average 1% for 100,000 up to 5,000. It makes
Oh,
a
I've
deal.
seen much bigger deposits.
And
than five.
yeah, in this market where, you've got multiple people vying for one house, the stronger position you can be in, the better. And it does show, it shows great solvency, like, I can give you a $5,000 deposit, but I've got the 10,000 sitting in there. It's mixed for a very strong offer compared to all the $1,000 offers that are out there. So yeah, everything's negotiable.
Yep, so there is no cap. I have heard of somebody putting more than 50% down.
Mhm.
So,
They
and there's
really,
not a
really,
cap.
really, really want the house.
Yeah.
When I sold a house and people did that. It was the last time we had a seller's market, and I had two people on, the first hour. My house was listed and they were so desperate they lost out on 2 other houses. They gave me a 50% deposit. Who says no to that?
So there's no cap. You can put down $100,000 deposit, but that's called cash. So I don't know why you just wouldn't write a cash offer. Let's see, where were we? Advise the client to call the insurance, ask listing agent for names of utility providers. You don't have to ask them. Where can you find it? Down. It's in the tax record usually. It's also should be in the MLS. You can ask for it. In ours, it's in the PCD, the property condition disclosure.
It is there.
Have buyers set up utilities in their name, the effective date. So they may have to call back and give a final closing date because that, again, it's a moving target. Say we're planning to close on this date, and then they're going to call like 48 or 24 hours before and confirm that date. Ask the utilities when they call. Follow up with a lender for loan commitment docs and notify listing agent prior to commitment date and contract. So you got a listing commitment date of the 15th. I have a week out. I'm calling, if I haven't received it already, I'm calling up my loan officer and say, hey, we're about a week out. How's everything going? Oh, it's good. We should have it tomorrow. Great. If I don't get it, I'll give you a call in a couple of days. And I'll call again 2 days out if I haven't received it. Stay on these things. Follow up with a lender. Then it's contact settlement title company for buyer instructions to settle at closing. That's not us. We don't do that. Your attorney's doing this part. So this is for other states. Your attorney is doing this. This is a nice little call to your paralegal. Everything on target. We got title, we got survey. Is there anything we need? Is there anything I can do for you? Do I need to make any phone calls? Go pick up a piece of paper and move it for you. I always call my paralegals on day one and say, if we haven't worked together before, if you need me to do anything, I'm a realtor. I will do whatever you need me to do to get this deal through. Oh, that's great to know. How often do they call me? Almost never. But they know that I'm willing to do whatever's needed to help my client. If I have once picked up a survey from one attorney and driven it down the street and take it to the other one, just to expedite it, rather than them getting a courier. Want me to do it? I'll come pick it up right now, move it right now. Yeah, sure. So I've done that one time. And that's because they were on the same street and everybody knew everybody. So they were comfortable with me moving it. But otherwise, I don't think they would have broken the chain of custody. Schedule a walkthrough if possible. Schedule your final walkthrough. So sometimes there's a first walkthrough to check on repairs and those kinds of things. And then there's a final walkthrough 24 to 48 hours before closing. And again, it's situational. It's going to depend on each offer. Good God, this PowerPoint never ends.
I know, and there's so much information in here, and I know I have to take a bathroom break soon. So,
all right, you go for a sec.
A
Listing
bio break.
agent, have the seller schedule municipal testing and occupancy permits, have the seller schedule utilities to be turned off. Remind the seller to set up their mailing. There's a nice little worksheet that we have on a checklist, and there's one in Hannah presentations on all the steps that they should do, and it's great. There's lots of little things. The more you give them, the better they like you because they haven't missed things, like telling them to leave the garage door openers on the counter and make sure they're not on their visors in their cars. I have chased garage door openers. That's the worst thing to chase for. They forget that one is really frequent. Assist with scheduling inspections, re-inspections, termite, moisture, any kind of inspection. You should be involved in helping them get everything scheduled. You may be the person that goes to be there to meet somebody to make it easier for them, so they can be out of the house. Also, it's stressful for them to be there where somebody's doing some of these inspections. So you could be there if you need to be. So I'm there, lots of agents aren't there. It's how you run your business. You decide. Assist the seller with getting repairs completed. You may recommend handymans, you may recommend roofers, or again, don't give them one name, give them several names to choose from. You don't want to be responsible for the choice. Assist with setting up movers, packers if needed. Have a list. Who are you going to provide? Who do you know in your area? Both sides. Submit all the required documents, remind people of deadlines and critical dates. What's Alta settlement?
That's the paperwork that a title company uses for closing, which does not apply in New York State.
That's why I don't
So,
know it. So this is
yeah,
your attorney.
Yeah, the attorney will review all of those numbers, the hard final numbers with you, which is not RESPA, what's the new thing? Shauna, what am I thinking of?
It's
Oh,
it
a
is
TRID.
disclosure-
TRID.
The TRID, yep.
Thank you. Woo.
Closing disclosure has all that right on there, so they'll take care of the dollars and cents with underwriters and such.
Right. So everybody's got to agree to all of the hard numbers and have plenty of time to think on it and regurgitate all the numbers and before a closing gets scheduled.
And in your
Something
case,
relative.
your admins will send your attorneys a bill for your commission. And the attorneys, once they're paid, will write that check and usually mail it out. I have one attorney in my area who I absolutely adore because he brings it to the closing table and I go to all my closings, so I have my check right in my hand. But it's
in
my
our
big
next-
check. I still have to take it back to my broker so they get their portion.
Yeah, the checks are always made out to Howard Hanna. They're never made out to Maggie Knapp.
Dang. And make so much
And
more
that's
money.
Another local practice thing of, some agents go to every closing. Some agents go to no closings. It depends on your local marketplace. I always went to all of my closings. You are in New York State, you are the fly on the wall and the closing room. You should not even sit at the closing table. If you're there, you should sit in the corner and keep your mouth zippoed, because by the time everybody's around the closing table, it's the attorney's job to get it all closed. There's a rare exception when, I've been at a closing where a buyer stood up and said, nope, there was stuff left in the garage, I'm not closing. And at the end of the day, everybody calmed down, the power went out, it was a crazy day. But unless you are asked specifically a question, if you're there, almost don't even have a conversation. So that's why a lot of agents don't even go. But in our neck of the woods, the checks are all cut at closing. So you can walk away with your side of the transaction to bring back to your office.
Yeah, in
So
our
check your
area,
manager.
they are not all cut at the closing. Some bring them, some don't. In most closings, I never say anything. I have had one or two closings where after they did all of their business, I said, did we get this and this and this? Or beforehand, I will have said to the attorney, remember that we need this or this or this, because there was a couple of things that happened that we needed to get some compensation for, or to make sure that we'd gotten a receipt on or something. And so I'm just, I act as a reminder, very gentle reminder. Remember, we had this and we haven't gotten that receipt yet. And that's it. And but you have to be very careful. Jen's right. You are a fly on the wall most of the time. But I go to all my closings. Big surprise, right? Obtain a thank you and congratulations gift card for your client. It's not expensive. You made a lot of money. A thoughtful gift is a nice thing. It can have your name on it. It can be fancy. I love the movie It's a Wonderful Life. For all of my clients, I bring them salt and bread and a bottle of wine and fresh flowers. And I say, so your home will have beauty. I give them the flowers. So that your home shall, your life shall have flavor. I give them the salt. So your home will never know hunger. I give them the bread, and that she'll always know joy. I give them wine. For my clients who don't drink, I bring them sparkling cider. For my gluten-free person, I brought her a bag of rice instead of bread. I brought her a gluten-free bubbly drink that I found in the organic section instead of the wine. Instead of bread, sometimes I've brought a sheet pizza because they moved themselves in. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I will.
something, you know, whatever.
I will say that the people, especially buyers at the closing, are not at their best because they're usually going from the closing table to their cars, to the moving van, to the new house. You know, people show up at closings not at their best. So it's okay to maybe visit them after the fact, like a week later, because it's stressful. Like all you want is those keys and that garage door opener. And then, you know, then they've got, you know, hours and hours of moving and, you know, yeah, I mean, give them show up 2 hours later with a pizza and a 6-pack of soda and beer if they're beer drinkers. That's much appreciated. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to be fancy. You all are new. I mean, if people like wine, just give them a nice bottle of wine and write a nice handwritten note. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, aren't there limits to what we can give? Technically, yes. It's a token. It's a token. And trust me, they're, you know, maybe giving them a bottle of wine at the closing table if they're literally going to start moving that next hour. Maybe a bottle of wine is not the right thing to give them right then. Show up at their house 2 hours later and just, you know, leave it as the movers are carting, you know, furniture in. But yeah, people are not usually at their best.
But those sheet pizzas, when they're moving themselves, and I ask them, how many people are helping you move? And I'll just get an appropriate amount of pizza and drive it over and bring some sodas with me. I don't stay to help them move. I come, I drop the pizza, and I say, good luck, call me if you need anything. Peace out. And
I'll check in with you in a week or two.
Yep, and then do it. So it doesn't have to be fancy. You can only write off, I think, $25 in your taxes. Anything over that is just on you. Be sure all documents and any correspondence become part of your life. Make sure you're keeping what you need to keep, and you're keeping all the pertinent information, and you've got all your ducks in a row. Seller's estimate sheet, there's one on Go Hannah. If you don't know how to do this, talk to your manager, talk to your loan officer. A net sheet shows the seller what they're going to walk away with after everything is done. There's a sample of one. It's a really nice sheet. A lot of people don't do it. You should do it. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, get your loan officer. They can help you. Get your manager. They can help you. And this tells them what they're going to walk away with. But caveat, this is an estimate. You will get final numbers from your attorney, because you do not have access to all the minutia of what is charged penny by penny. They do. So yours is an estimate. I circle the word estimate in red before I give it to them. You'll have a copy of this. So this is one that's filled out to show you what it looks like. And the one that people freak out about, the agents, is the broker fee. It's a big number. And people don't like people to see it. Guess what? They have to see it. They're going to see it. And so you're going to have to get comfortable with it. It's standard. This is what it costs to sell your house. There's nothing
And
else
just
here.
understand, at the closing table, a buyer is going to have an attorney, a seller is going to have an attorney. So that closing table gets pretty crowded, because then also sometimes there's a separate title person. And buyers have their paperwork, sellers have their paperwork. And it's two very distinct and separate piles of paper. You know, one's a little easier than the other, but yeah. So, I mean, the buyer doesn't necessarily need to know what the seller paid for their commission. But anyway, yeah, that's
All right.
okay. Time
Back
for a
in your
break.
seats by 11:05.